takes a little bit longer.
Good Lord.
Exactly.
It's running.
I have a little bit. I have a little bit to say at the beginning, and then we'll get started.
Are you going to tell them how hot Bill is?
It's a little hot.
It might come up.
It might come up.
Are we live, Ryan?
We are live.
I believe we're live.
All right, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. Hey. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our BHIS webcast, Black Hills Information Security webcast. My name is Jason Blanchard. I'm the Content Community Director at Black Hills. And the only reason I'm here right now is to tell you that if you're watching live, hello, for the next 30 minutes, you're going to be in something called PreShow Banter. If you're watching the recording, please fast forward 30 minutes. Like seriously, there's chapter points down below. Just go ahead and click on the main show. Because for the next 30 minutes, you're like, what is this? Why am I watching this? I just wanted to learn about SSH keys or something. And
I keep hearing about how hot Bill is instead.
Yeah.
They missed that. I'm sad.
But you got to do it like this. Bill is so hot.
There's keys. Yeah. Way to bring it back. Thanks for joining us today. If you're watching, join us in Discord. We're on the Black Hills server today, and you're like, what is the Black Hills server? We'll bring that up in a little bit. But we're in the webcast live chat. It's got a big red button next to it. And so go ahead and join us there. If you are on Discord, go ahead and feel free to chat with us for the next 30 minutes because we have nothing to talk about yet.
We have so much to talk about.
Like what?
About the things that we already talked about, we're going to talk about.
Oh, the things that we talked about that we're going to talk about?
What we're going to talk about.
Are we going to talk about how it's St. Patrick's Day?
Yes. It's St. Patrick's Day.
I might not believe you. No one has a shamrock shake here.
Oh.
Yeah, really. And the slides are not green.
No theming.
You have 28 minutes. You could go get a shamrock shake.
Or
not where Bill
blackout
lives.
drunk.
Well, at least Deb, Jason, and David got it right. You're wearing green. So.
Yeah.
So I remember before the pandemic when the bars were always full on St. Patrick's Day that you could go and the lines were so long for a beer that you would get 2 beers at once because it would be while you finish the first, you would get back in line and finish the second in the line. Anyone else? No?
Nope, definitely.
No.
Just me?
I think I'll just change my backlight to green. There we go.
Nice.
There you go.
Ooh.
It's got a bit of I don't want to say nauseating look to it, but a bit of a nauseating look to it.
Bill made it.
It's like everybody's like,
the Canadians here, everybody. Be quiet.
Oh, sorry.
That's so
I'm sorry.
Hey there.
I don't know if everybody gets the exact same layout, but I've got David Quartarello and Paul Lynn's spot. So he's the one to go for first.
Nice.
Anybody remember? Was it Match Game?
Yeah, I got
No.
Ryan there.
match game.
Hollywood Squares.
Hollywood Squares.
Mhm.
Yep.
I would give anything for Ryan to organize us playing actual Hollywood Squares with Infosec questions or something.
Oh man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ryan, you've got a few free minutes this afternoon. Can you set that up?
And
We'll get right on that.
we bring in the Discord community. I would like Hannah for the block, please. And you're like, all right. And then Hannah's like, I don't know the answer to that. I was like, or someone asked me a technical question. I'm like,
You lost Hannah.
Pass. Can you pass in Hollywood Squares?
That's right. You go black if you don't know the answer.
yeah.
Oh,
I
it
didn't
was
know
so
the
nice.
answer.
Why is Ryan Reynolds here? Because he's in everything.
Aw.
Oh,
It's a rule.
was that a reference to me?
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
no. Who else looks like Ryan? It's me. He was talking about me.
Someone called me the family value of Ryan Reynolds. What was it? It's like the off-brand Ryan Reynolds.
The
That's kind of mean.
generic brand. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I was like, huh. How Jesse Plemons is the off-brand of Matt Damon.
It's the grocery store brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah. Well, Jason, if you use Mint Mobile, that'd be a little creepy, I guess.
Yeah, I don't see it anymore. I don't see Ryan Reynolds anymore.
That's fine.
What do you mean you don't see him? He's in lots of movies. He's just in a new one called The Adam Project.
Oh, Dale.
Oh, nice, Dale. Dale, your camera's off,
Your
by the way.
camera-
I know. I don't know why all of a sudden it says my camera is not working. I'm looking right at it. It just says tell me to
I
pick a
don't-
different camera. So I don't know what's
Is
going on.
the
here.
internet different in Canada?
No, I don't know. It just says failed to start the video camera. So I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe
Canadian
Dale's on
internet-
Mint Mobile right now.
Yeah. The
Dale-
Canadian
Dale-
internet only allows 4 people at a time. So he's got to get one of the others to jump off.
No. Dale, just point it somewhere else besides it yourself, and it may start working again.
Let's try that and see.
Whoa.
The old Canadian filter.
No luck there.
Yeah.
No luck there.
Didn't do it.
No love
Oh,
for-
I tried.
No love for the
That-
Canadian today.
That's all I know about
Oh.
cameras. So
This,
Oh,
I think you have to pay the GST to get your camera to work.
you're really.
Well, it was working a couple minutes ago. You saw me there, but now all of a sudden,
we did.
So I have an issue right now where this shirt, my green shirt, my Recco shirt that I wanted to wear on St. Patrick's Day was in the laundry, which means I had to dig it out from the bottom of the laundry, which means I'm sitting here smelling
Huh.
the laundry right now. And it's very distracting. I don't,
So one good thing about COVID and working from home, is that what you're saying?
You just shared with all our friends that you're wearing a dirty shirt.
it's a dirty shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a dirty,
Unpleasant.
dirty shirt.
So NC Cyber Threat Hunter said, I'm starting to mistake Ryan Reynolds for Banjo Crashland. So when he sees Ryan Reynolds, he thinks of you, Jason, and not the other way around. So,
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think out of all this, we've determined that Bill is hot and Jason is dirty.
Yes.
Yes. And that's
Boy, do I see the lawsuits coming fast and furious after this thing closes down. There we go.
I came here to learn about SSH keys.
HR has entered the chat.
Yes.
Ding, 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 ding.
So one of our friends, Nerd Herders, said in the Discord channel that I need to visit the Spearfish General Store, which these are currently on sale. I'm going to be shameless in selling these because we've already sold half of them. So we ordered 500. More than half of them have already been sold. And that's cool. That's cool. No, that's cool. That's it. I had nowhere else.
So basically, there's like
And we're done.
smalls left, and that's it, right?
Extra smalls.
Yeah. So one person did go to the store, ordered from the Spearfish General Store a Recco hoodie, and was immediately flagged by their bank as a fraudulent purchase. That you?
Wow.
That happened to
Oh,
you?
wow.
Yesterday?
No, it was someone
Oh,
else.
It happened yesterday for me.
Wow. Nice.
I wonder if that's a natural occurrence for people.
I've ordered from it before, and I immediately got bounced back from my my bank. And I was just like, I just want a hoodie. Just want a hoodie.
I think you answered your own question. That's
Yeah.
why.
I think it's a I feel like it's an odd compliment to us. Like
Yeah.
that we have arrived. I don't
Hacker hoodies. Wow.
Well, there's so many people who, when they see the link to Spearfish General Store, they're like, I've been trained not to click this.
Yeah.
I
Visit
think
the
anybody.
Spearfish General Store in a VM.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Anybody
that-
who's looking at it and saying, wow, there's PHISH in the URL, that must mean that it's bad. But if we didn't have that, that must mean it's safe, needs to find a new job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, we call it the Spearfish General Store because Spearfish is where the Black Hills headquarters is. Like it literally is headquartered in Spearfish, South Dakota. So we thought it would be fun to play off that with Spearfish General Store, and apparently some banks don't like it.
Now,
Although,
Jason,
is it any ETA on when it won't be in Spearfish anymore?
Well, yeah, they moved the shipping to Sturgis, South Dakota, but our mailing address is still Spearfish.
Well, no, I mean the hospital.
Yeah, that's Sturgis.
That's Sturgis. Mhm.
Ah, okay, got it.
Yep, they moved all the distribution to Sturgis.
so how much influence did John have on naming the town? That's what I want.
Never thought of it backwards that way.
Yeah.
He moved there because it was called that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Well, now being based in Sturgis, they're going to think we're a bunch of biker hackers.
Mm.
Hacker bikers.
Not. My biker hackers.
There's gonna be like
Keith,
one
you
time
sure
a
you want to
year-
give the presentation today?
Yeah, right.
Well,
Just watch as I stumble through this.
I'm just picturing right
Rented
now, like
lips.
during bike week, we're trying to do a webcast or training. It's like just outside. Sorry,
Passing out
everybody,
from the
bikers.
fumes, you know.
Deb's riding through town with an HDMI projector on the back of a Harley.
I can see that. Mhm.
Yep.
Sons of Anarchy like meets Mr. Robot, just biker hacker.
All good
Yeah,
ideas.
I am gonna have to change this shirt at some point soon because it's just got
Oh
a
my gosh.
dirty clothes smell.
Oh no.
Yeah, how dirty you guys were.
Maybe it's possessed, Jason.
I do have ghost hunters coming here on Saturday.
You guys
I
have to
saw
be back.
that. I saw that. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so since moving into my house, like since moving in, we've had strange occurrences that have happened in this house. I wasn't a ghost believer until about 6 months after living here, and then all of a sudden I saw something, and then my daughter also saw something that night, and so two stories collaborated, and then a couple years later, like over the course of the last 7 years of living, seven years of living here, we've had enough to where we could. You're like. Like sometimes stuff throws itself off my shelf. Like
I
it
have
just
witnessed
comes.
that.
Yeah, that was
I
here
was
one day when like
here
a
one
plant
day.
just threw itself off the shelf.
Fell right off.
Okay, guys, who wants to be the first to let Jason know he has a cat in the house? I don't want to break.
Actually, I was thinking it was more like self-sacrifice based on a stinky shirt.
It's possible.
The
I was
plant
gonna
just said, "I can't take it anymore," and tried to end it all.
I was gonna say lead paint.
No,
I hope it wasn't
no,
an
no
InfoSec
lead paint?
plant.
My house
It
was
was
built
not.
in 1827. Originally built in 1827. It was remodeled in 1926, and then completely refurbished in 2013. So it could be lead paint. Could be.
So how did you get the ghost hunters there? Do you just call them up, like you call Ghostbusters and say, "Hey, I got a problem," or what?
So what happened was I had a coworker at a previous place that is one of the investigators. Like that's his hobby. He's a ghost hunting, that's his thing. And I was just telling him about the house, and he's like, "Oh, I would love to see that." And I was like, and that was years ago. And then we had some more things happen in the house. And so finally I was like, I'm calling him. So I called him, and then we had like a pre-interview of like, just run through some of the things. And after the pre-interview, like the guy is like, I can't wait to come over to your house. This sounds amazing.
Oh,
I was like,
man.
okay.
Wow.
So is it going to be on TV, like one of the TV shows? Because those ones are always disappointing because you watch the show and you're like, something scary is going to happen. And you get to the end of the show and like, well, we didn't find anything. You're like, oh, crap. Stay tuned for next time or we don't find anything again.
Yeah, right.
You'll know they were successful if the Spearfish General Store carries gallons of ectoplasm.
We should just send all the BHIS people over there. Maybe we'll scare the ghosts away.
Keep wearing that shirt, Jason. They may leave on their own.
Yeah, really.
I really need to change this shirt.
Wait, you got 17 minutes and you can change your shirt.
Yeah, when I come on at the end for the Q&A part, you're like, oh, he changed.
And then like freshly showered too, right?
Yeah. Oh.
I can see if we're up there for a conference and Jason's like, "Oh, you're welcome to stay over at my place." And be like, "Oh, thanks, but no,
Nope,
I'm
we're all
good."
set. Not a problem. Nope.
I have
Okay.
done that. I didn't see any ghosts,
Yeah.
Man.
but I
Well-
have been there.
Well, for Halloween last year during the pandemic, I gave my daughter a ghost tour of her own house. And like the whole time she's like, Are you messing with me? And I was like, sure. So she hasn't seen a lot of the things that I've seen. And so, that way so she can sleep at night. And she's like, are you serious right now? Or like, do you really not want me to ever be able to sleep in this house? And I was like, yeah, you're fine. But when people come to stay now, we do go ghost tours. So if anybody would like a ghost tour when you come to stay, then
Not me. Thank you, though.
But Keith, speaking of conferences, nice segue. We do have the Wild West Hacking Fest coming up. So we would love, here's my 1 minute request. If you've been a part of these webcasts, if you're interested in traveling, if you want to go to San Diego, we would love to meet you. We would love to meet you because we've been doing this for the last 2.5 years. You've been in our Discord channels, you've been in our chat, we've been able to talk at you, but we've never been able to talk with you. And so we want to get the opportunity to talk with you. at this event that's coming up in May, Wallace Hacking Fest. Now, we're also going to other, we'll be at ShmooCon, we'll be at B-Sides Nashville, we'll be at B-Sides
Fort
Wayne, and other events. Like, we are going to RSA, we're going to other places. We want to meet you there, but we would love to meet you at Wallace Hacking Fest in May in San Diego, because that's just going to be a really great time. And it's laid back, not a lot of people there. So if you're still worried about being around a lot of people, I think the state of California doesn't let us have that many people there, but we'll have enough people to make it a good event.
And if you're worried about people getting too close, Jason will lend you his shirt.
And the garlic that he used to drive out the last spirit.
Yes.
He's real stinky.
Yeah. After a couple of weeks, it's really going to smell. I'll be there. Hannah, I think you were sorry, Keith, you'll be there, right?
Yeah.
And-
Well, right now there's a like 97.5% chance I'm going to be there. So
Same here.
I'm pretty certain.
I'll be giving a talk on advanced threat hunting techniques, and love to see you there for that. That'll be somewhere in the last 2 days of the conference. I'm not quite sure when.
And then one last thing, and then we'll get back to talking about Ghost and my dirty shirt. As of today, the Antisyphon Infosec training organization has launched on-demand training. So we now have on-demand training available at any time. And the thing about it is, like, once you get the on-demand training, it's yours for life. So when it gets updated, when it gets changed, like, revised over the course of, the next years until all the ghosts come. So Antisyphon now has on-demand training. The team's been working on it for months. And so it finally launched this week. And so it is available. And Chris, is one of your classes available yet on demand?
Yeah, I think the packet decoding class is one of the first ones they pushed out.
Awesome. Yep.
Fantastic.
All right. And that's it. That's all the things I'm going to talk about that are not related to whatever else we want to talk about.
I got mesmerized by Chris's spinning
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. I've glanced down a few times and got lost.
I just had a thought. You could like sharpen the edges and like toss potatoes in there or something.
Oh, that's true.
French fry machine.
Yeah,
Well,
just kind
what
of
do you need
toss
that for?
stuff in the middle.
You can slice potatoes with a great big sword on the back.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's Ralph.
That's right. I
Ralph.
forgot you named it, Ralph.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good old Ralph.
Good old
Now,
Ralph.
do swords work against defending against ghosts?
No.
Oh, hey.
No,
Maybe
but
depending on the
A bunch of
material.
no, but
water
they
jugs.
do work against guys trying to date your younger sister. So
Speaking of which, we're going to go around and introduce ourselves, say what we do here. So I'll start with Ryan. What do you do here, Ryan?
Oh, what do? I edit podcasts. I run the back end for the webinar, the webcast stuff, what you're watching right now. I handle that stuff, and a bunch of behind the scenes things.
Yeah. Essentially, if you've ever
video-related
watched
things.
anything on YouTube, most likely Ryan had something to do with it. So.
Mhm.
Yep.
Keith, what do you do around here?
Well, again, this is like the most scariest question in the world. So what do you do? Because actually, just like Ryan, I actually do have quite a list, but primarily I do work for Active Countermeasures. I help support the development team for AC Hunter, as well as with Rita. I also do web development. I do threat hunting, which is something that I really, really enjoy. A lot of fun. So I do threat hunting for Black Hills for our HTalk service. And I could go on and on, but that's basically in a nutshell.
yep, he could very well go on and on and on.
And in about 10 minutes, you'll hear me go on and on.
Nice segue, Bill. Bill, what do you do around here?
Here we go. I'm the one who does a lot of the tech support for Active Countermeasures, which means that I figured out how to put an autoresponder on my email saying, have you rebooted it yet?
Yeah.
And now I don't have to do tech support ever again. It's great. I also do occasional training, minor development for Active Countermeasures. And all that means is we have people who are hired to do professional programming, and they do a wonderful job. I throw in terrible scripts that make their lives harder, and then they can hate me. So this is how amateur developers should not be allowed anywhere near GitHub. Let me make sure that's very clear.
Speaking of David, David, what do you do around here?
I do exactly what Bill just said. Bill hired me as a Chris made the mistake of letting me pick my own title. So I'm a professional open source developer.
Nice.
Wow.
I was going to go with Ninjaneer, but I didn't really like the ring for that.
Way better.
It doesn't work on resumes very well.
I would hire you in a second.
Absolutely.
Why would you need a resume though, David?
No reason at all, Jason.
The job hunting ninja.
I think I need to plug Jason's Twitch feed now.
Yeah.
Is that like how this works? We just go around the circle and plug each other's stuff?
I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but go ahead.
I'm actually working with Bill on a feature for Passer doing fingerprinting for operating systems over the network.
Very cool.
So we'll be talking about that hopefully later on in the year.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, passive fingerprinting, something we badly need.
Yeah. The tools that Active Countermeasures is just releasing for free are just fantastic. Like, it's like more and more, like the list keeps getting longer, and we mentioned them. And so we got the zine coming up. We're going to do a cyber threat hunting zine, and we'll be able to feature all those tools. So that'd be cool. Hannah, what do you do around here?
That is a great question. I used to be useful. Now I just heckle Bill and Keith and sometimes show up.
What do you mean? That's totally useful. That's a full-time job.
Yeah, you're absolutely useful.
To the 151 people here right now, if you're in our Discord channel, go ahead and drop into the live chat. So that way I know you know where it is. But go ahead and put a GIF in right now that represents where you're from in the world. So just go ahead and drop that in. Deb's probably looking for a crab with a knife.
So cool.
We got another Maryland.
Already pasted.
I know.
Maryland. It's the
that's
best flag in the Union.
Great onesie.
Good job, everybody.
Well done.
Maryland.
Someone's from Mars. Great. Whenever I drove through the desert of the United States, I was like, wow, we could live on Mars. What this is? It's just this.
Yeah.
Amazon takes a little longer to get there. They won't do Prime.
Oh, and no oxygen. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's that detail. That's the first thing you want to order.
For now. Chris, Brent, what do you do around here?
Oh, I break shit.
Nice.
That seems to be like my primary job. Like over the last week, I think I pushed Bill through, what was it, Bill? Like 5 updates to Beacon Simulator.
Absolutely.
So Bill will like fix something, and then I'll break it again, and then he'll fix something and I'll break it again. And sometimes it's finding bugs, and sometimes it's just I'm an idiot. So
and frankly, as far as being a QA engineer, there is no difference. It really doesn't matter what the motivation is for finding the problem. The fact that you found it is what matters. People make good money being QA engineers.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of people who break things, Dale, what do you do around here?
Well, when I managed to break everybody else's internet so I can have one of the 4 internet slots in Canada, apparently I test with Black Hills.
Oh, sure. Good job.
Nice. Good
Lucky
job.
today I've got internet today.
Oh, lovely. Yep.
Dale's also a tester at Black Hills. In case. Yeah. Deb, what do you do around here?
I do community things and give lots of fun stuff away. And I just people. I'm in charge of people. I'm a people person.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah, we like you, so it's working.
Yeah. There's people here. It's working.
All right. Keep doing it.
And I'm the
Jason, what do you do?
I'm the grocery store version of Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, aisle 12 with a blue light special.
We got another question about the twirly things behind Chris.
There are no twirly things behind Chris. Did someone see twirly?
What are you talking about?
Check your copy.
Do we need to reach out to this person and see if they need?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're seeing. Yeah.
Weird.
want
But to
an
everyone here, there's 200 of you here right now. You're on what's called pre-show banter. Pre-show banter is the 30 minutes before a webcast here at Black Hills and Active Countermeasures and Wild West Hack and Fest. We do this because, one, there's going to be a lot of you here, and we want to get out our own jitters. This is considered public speaking, even though we don't get to see all of you. We know you're there. And so we do this so that we can talk to each other and get out our own jitters speaking in public. The other reason is because I hate being on a webcast where like it's just silence the whole time, and then all of a sudden like it starts. It's like, hello, and thank you for joining the webcast today. Today we have Bill Stearns talking about SSH. Like that's not what I want. I want this. So that's why we do this, because I want it, and we all want it.
Is
We
it
still have
here?
the,
Is Jason moonlighting at NPR?
Yeah.
The same thing.
I thought it was Ryan Reynolds.
All things considered with Ryan Reynolds.
It turns out he's actually Terry Gross, but you wouldn't know it.
I'm not even going to mention the secret podcast that I host on NPR. Fine. No. All right, everybody, we're going to start in 4 minutes. We got Bill here, we got Chris here, we got David here, we got Hannah here, we got Dale here, Keith here. And the reason I mentioned them is because they're going to help answer questions in the back end. Deb and I will answer questions like, will there be slides? And is this available? Is the recording available? We will answer those questions, because every once in a while there are people here for the very first time and they don't know how we do this and they don't know what it's like. And you're probably like a little freaked out right now because you're, I don't know, your lunch break, or you just got to work and you decided to watch a webcast because you heard about SSH keys, and then you're like, why is he talking about his dirty shirt?
Over and over and over again.
Just
really
killing me right now.
So, Deb, where would somebody go if they wanted a copy of the slides?
They could go to the channel that is titled Webcast Slides.
Oh, it's a secret password then. Okay. You only can go there if you know the name of the channel. Yeah, feel free to pull down the PDF, because frankly, trying to type anything that you've got on the screen just doesn't work. And I know this from experience. Yes. 94-mile long URLs, and you're trying to type them. Somebody hits the next slide. It's like, oh, come on. I was 3/4 of the way through. I was 3/4 of the way through mistyping it, but come on. I was 3/4 of the way through.
If anyone here does want a Reco hoodie like the one I'm wearing right now, I have the prototype. It is super soft. It's wonderful. It shrinks about a half a size, so keep that in mind. But those are available at our Spearfish General Store. And the reason why we sell hoodies is because people asked us to. So.
Do they all come smelling like laundry, or is your special edition?
Mine special edition. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much.
It costs extra.
I knew you were great.
It's an
Might smell like tuna.
upcharge.
it's been seasoned.
I've heard of vending machines in Japan where you can do the same thing, and I don't want to tell you what you can buy there. That's,
Nope. So if you're like, why do we sell things on it? Well, we do proudly suck at capitalism, which means there's people on our team who say you should sell. And they say to me, you should sell your shirts for like $15 more and the hoodies for another like $20 more, because we're losing money on them. And I'm like, yeah, because we're not a t-shirt business. We're a pen testing, threat hunt, red team, AtT&CK company. Like that's no, I don't mind losing $8 on a t-shirt when someone's willing to wear my t-shirt. So thank you for being willing to wear a Black Hills t-shirt. It like every time one sells, we're like, that's so nice of them. Someone wants to
We
wear
really
the
wanted to
shirt.
just give them away for free.
Yeah, we just lost more money.
Every time a t-shirt sells, an angel gets his wings.
So, all right, everybody, go ahead and bring up the slides. Bill, it's all yours here in just a second. So go ahead and bring up the slides. I want to make sure that those are working. The hoodie doesn't shrink 50%, it shrinks half a size. So I wouldn't say it shrinks half its size, it only shrinks half a size. So instead of it being if you get a large, it becomes like a medium plus.
Medium and a half.
Yeah, medium and a half. All right.
So the trick is just don't wash it, and then you don't have to worry about it.
It'll
No.
just smell like Jason's
That's
shirt.
Jason's trick.
Yeah.
Killing me right now.
You
All
should.
right. So, Bill, I'm turning it over to you in just a few seconds. To everybody that's here today, thank you so much for joining us. If you've never been a part of a Black Hills webcast before, we do this all the time. In fact, I think we have one coming up in 2 weeks where we're going to teach people how to play backdoors and breaches. We've been doing it solo, where we're teaching demos to company after company after company. And we decided, how about we just teach a couple thousand people at once? So join us on the 31st for a webcast on how to play backdoors and breaches, which is an incident response game. If you're like, what the heck are you talking about? It's a game to play incident response tabletops, and it's very, very, very effective. All right, Bill, it is 1 o'clock Eastern time. So if you don't need to be here, go ahead and kill your camera and microphone. If you do need to be here, keep those suckers on. All right, so Bill, thanks for joining us today. Bill killed his camera. Bill, no, come back, Bill.
I'm going to turn my camera off so that Ryan has a nice clean screen to work with when it comes time for the webcast. But I'll introduce myself real briefly, and then we'll kill the camera.
Okay.
I work for Active Countermeasures, and as I said, I've been an instructor for them. I've been working on tech support. I've been harassing the real developers, but I'm also one that has been using SSH for a long time. I wanted to give a little bit of background on SSH keys today. We'll go through the process. There's a lot to learn, but we'll try to cover it all in an hour. I'll kill my camera now and welcome everybody. I'm glad you're all here. And of course, I can't find. Oh, here we go. Yep. Just need to figure out how to. There we go. Camera, stop video. Good deal. So you're welcome to ask questions anytime. If you look over in the Zoom chat, there should be a link to Black Hills Information Security's Discord server. You can also get to it by going to discord.gg/BHIS. And the channel that we're in is Webcast Live Chat. So we'd love to encourage you to ask questions there. You're also welcome to use the Q&A window inside Zoom, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. Thank you very much to everybody at Black Hills who got this set up, including Jason and Deb and Ryan and everybody else in the background who's here to answer questions. We really appreciate it. If you're going to be using keys, there's no limit on the operating system you can be doing this with. However, we're kind of assuming that you're using perhaps Linux, Mac OS, or it's one of the BSD flavors, because OpenSSH is the default. It comes pre-installed, and for Linux and the BSDs, and I think Mac OS, although I haven't looked at it in a while, they're all the servers enabled by default and the clients already in there. You can also do what we're going to talk about today with Windows 10 if you have one of the following. If you have the Cygwin library and utilities installed, you're all set. If you have Windows Subsystem for Linux, either 1 or 2, then you can use either of those. We don't encourage this with the PowerShell window. I haven't gotten to a point where I've learned how to run SSH in there. You may be running into headaches with that. If you don't have any of those, then Windows 7 through 10 should be just fine. You can install SmartTTY or PuTTY. The graphical tools and the options are going to be different. Where you find them and what you have to enable is going to be different, but the concepts are all the same. Jason, feel free to join audio if there's anything I need to do different with my audio here on this side.
Yeah, it's a little staticky. Is it battery powered or is it?
Nope, it's plugged in. Yep.
Okay.
Maybe it's just I'm turning my head too much. There we go.
All right. Keep an eye on it. Thanks, Bill.
Sounds great. So the reason why we're covering SSH, it is such a multi-use tool. It encrypts everything that goes across the connection. You can use this for terminal connections, file transfers. You can set up VPNs with it. You can do port forwarding with it. You can do X Windows tunneling to carry graphical applications. All of these are fantastic. It's cross-platform. I can sit down at basically any operating system anywhere and connect to any operating system anywhere. There are a couple of weird quirks. You wouldn't be able to necessarily run X Windows applications if you're on Windows. Occasionally you'll find minor compatibility issues, but as a short version, SSH can go from anywhere to anywhere. And it's easy to use. I just type SSH and then the name of the server or the IP address, and I'm in. That's the plus, but the downside is passwords. We've used them forever. Back in the days when you actually started off with Telnet, I Telnet to a machine and I type in a username and password. Or I get a little bit better with security and I say I want to encrypt this. Great. I just change that to SSH space, the name of the server, and I'm in again with a username and password. But the couple problems. One is I may have to look up those passwords. I'm really hoping you're not one of the people who shares passwords across 200 or 300 machines, because if somebody gets one, they can now get into them all. I have to type them in by hand, which is annoying and error prone. It slows you down when you're trying to transfer files or make a connection. And the worst part is that your password is actually stored on the other side of the connection. If you look in Etsy Shadow, there is what looks like an encrypted string. It's not actually encrypted. It's obfuscated, but somebody who's keen enough who can get a copy of that file and is keen enough to try to decrypt it or deobfuscate it can. So I'd like to have an approach where I don't actually have my login credentials stored on the server I'm connecting to. And that way is SSH keys. There are lots of ways to do this. We're going to cover this one approach today. If you want to talk about some more, then the webcast live chat is a great place to carry on that conversation either now or after the presentation's done. Here's why this matters. This came out on, I think, Facebook a little while ago. And while I can't verify the numbers myself, I believe that Hive Systems have done the work. Here's how long it takes to brute force guess passwords. And this is one of the things that we're trying to avoid. And I'll show you later on in this presentation is how to shut off passwords altogether when you get to a point where you want to do that. These numbers are not encouraging, and keep in mind, this is as of 2022. If you came back and looked at the same infographic 2 years from now, those numbers would have dropped probably by a factor of 10. So something that took an hour this year might take just 6 minutes in 2 years. So what are SSH keys? This is our new approach. We're going to break up the login process into two halves. The private half stays on my laptop. It never leaves. It's a file on that laptop and I never send it anywhere else. And in this case, the file that we're going to be working with is called ID_RSA. There are a couple of other files that we might be using. There are different types of keys that you can choose. You can have multiple keys, but for today's class, we're just going to assume you're using an RSA format key called ~/.ssh/ID_RSA. That's the private half. The public half is ~/.ssh/ID_RSA.pub. And it's called that to remind you that this is the one you can safely share. You can safely email this. You can send it across to a different server. You can post it on your web server if you want to make it easier for you to find. I wouldn't do that personally, but you could. That public key is what you will place on the remote server. I have two files. One stays local, one goes remote. And when it comes time to log in, the SSH client and the SSH server use those two files to prove that you are who you say you are, and you should be allowed into the remote server. There's no more password needed. You don't have to look up a password. The login happens automatically in the background. Nothing to remember. nothing to look up, nothing to mistype, and the connection is instant. It makes such a difference, especially when you're working with a lot of systems. If you've only got one computer that you connect to and you know that password by heart, maybe this isn't the presentation for you. But as I said on one of my opening slides, I've connected almost 3,000 different SSH servers in my decades in computer security, and I don't expect that number to do anything but continue to grow. So I want to make this as easy as possible, and what I've tried to do is put all of the steps needed into a simple script that you can put on your system. You can run this very easily. So when it comes time to log into a new system, you run SSH prep space, the name of the system I want to connect to. When I do that, SSH prep will do all of the background steps needed to make a connection with SSH keys. And in just a minute, we'll go through what those steps are. But if you want to see what's going on, you can add -v to the command line. And if you want to have SSH prep stop and tell you what it's going to do and ask you if that's okay, which is a great way if you've never used this before, you can add -s to the command line as well. And those are the two current options. That means that you get to see what it's going to do. It's also a relatively short script. And I do understand the concern about some bozo on the internet telling you to download a file and run it. Go ahead and take a look at the file, review the commands before you even run it for the first time. I won't be offended. Eyeball, your statement is correct. I was running out of the word, but you're absolutely correct. The passwords in Etsy Shadow are hashed, and hashing is not a reversible process, but it is brute forceable. So if somebody can get a hold of that file, they can bring it over to another system and simply run a password cracker on it constantly, day in, day out, run it on multiple servers, spin up a cloud server, run the password cracker there. You absolutely can find that password. It is simply a question of how long it's going to take. Thank you very much, Eyeball. So what's going to happen when you run this? Well, here are the changes that are going to happen on your system. If you don't already have a password key pair, you'll get a new one. It's going to be called ID_RSA and ID_RSA.pub. If you've already got one there, we'll use it. It won't overwrite what you've got. SSH prep will add a new section into SSH config. And the config file, if you haven't used that already, is where we store information about what servers we want to connect to. This will put in a convenience feature that will allow you to store the IP address permanently. It means that you don't have to go and look it up. You can modify this file yourself if you'd like. It's just an easy way to store information about multiple connections. And it's really handy if you've got some servers that are on different ports, or you have a different username on a target server. You can force that in //.sh/config. We're also going to add the public key, the content from the public key, into authorized _keys on the remote server. So as part of this process, it's going to ask you for your password once to connect out to that server. It'll copy the public key into that file. And that's the signal to the remote server that you should be allowed in if you have the corresponding private key. And you can take a look at that file both before and after you run SSH prep, and you should see at least one new line in that file for the public key that we created. The last thing that's going to change on your local system is a file called //.sh/known_hosts. And that keeps track of the IDs of the hosts that you're talking to, so that you know that when you connect up to a server a second time, that it's the same server you talked to before. SSH prep, it should work with anything on Linux, BSD, or Mac OS. If you're using Windows and you either have the Cygwin library or Windows subsystem for Linux, and it'll work with either 1.0 or 2.0, SSH prep should work with that as well. I believe it was Brian or David who checked that it will work with WSL, so I'm really happy with that. S11518, shouldn't we password protect our private keys in addition? Absolutely. When it comes time to create the keys, you should be entering what's called a passphrase. And this protects that file as it's sitting on disk. Now, we'll talk a little bit about how to use that to protect the key, but also to avoid having to type it every single time you connect somewhere, because that kind of destroys the purpose of making a quick and easy login. For PowerShell, this won't work because the script depends on a scripting environment called Bash that's available on all the environments I talked about above. PowerShell doesn't include that by default. So, as I said, you end up with two files in .ssh, which are your public and private key. ID_RSA is for your benefit alone. It should never leave your laptop. I use the term laptop to say the machine where you do your typing. And whether that's a laptop or desktop or anything else, I don't particularly care, but the private key never leaves your system. The public key you can copy off if you want to. It's going to get copied off every time you add it to authorized keys. SSH prep is going to do one convenience feature for you, and it's going to take that private key, it's going to read it off disk, and it's going to load it into SSH agent. Now, for most people, you don't have to care about what this is or where it comes from or how it gets started. If you're sitting at a Linux desktop or a Mac OS system, SSH agent is just plain going to be there. If it isn't there, SSH prep will tell you what command to run to make it appear, but we'll assume it's available. When you load a key into SSH agent, it's stored there in memory, meaning that when I go to connect out to some remote site, I don't have to worry about where is the private key stored? Do I have the passphrase for it? It's already loaded into memory. The login happens instantly without me typing anything at all. All right. If I have some of these already, no problem. If you've already got a key, if you've already got a config file, if the remote server already has an authorized keys, we respect what you have there. This simply goes and adds in any missing bits needed to make that connection. So you can run this safely on a system that already has public and private keys, and it won't go and destroy what you have there. It'll also just check to make sure that everything's working, and it'll send back a return code if everything's good or if something went wrong. If you're using a graphical SSH client on Windows, hey, fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't use them very often, and as much as I would like to have done some testing on how you could how you use Smart TTY on Windows, unfortunately, we had a lightning strike that took out the Ethernet port on my Windows box, so I've got to go replace that. I wasn't able to do anything, but I do have some slides for people who are using Smart TTY. Chris Brenton was kind enough to provide these. He loves the tool, and it works really well. If you're using a graphical SSH client, you can't use SSH prep. It's not going to help you. You want to use the configuration that's built into that client. Smart TTY and PuTTY are two common tools for that. You can download and install them on your Windows system. Had good luck with both in the past. When you create a new connection, you're going to say, I would like an SSH key and I'd like to use a passphrase. So let's take a look at how you're going to do this. I'm just going to cover graphical SSH tools real briefly, and then we'll come back to some more theory about these key pairs. This is how you set up a new connection in Smart TTY. Inside the connection alias box, you're going to give a name for this. You want to have some kind of easily rememberable name that's going to show up in your list of available connections. You want to check off, set up public key authentication, and don't ask for the password again. And you can either use an existing OpenSSH key or you can create a new one. Either one's fine. By the way, you can grab these slides, remember, from the webcast-slides channel. So if I'm going too quickly, you can always pull the PDF down and look at them at your leisure. So when you're looking at the main connection screen in Smart TTY, it'll show you both the short name of the system to the alias that you typed in on the previous slide. And it'll also say, when was the last time you used this and how did I get in? Did I get in with a password or a private key? And you'll notice in this example, we have one system that we got in with a password, and we have 5 systems into which we got in with a private key. Smart TTY has both the GUI to install packages or manage existing packages. You can use it for file transfer back and forth between your Windows system and the remote box. You can have multiple terminals with a tabbed interface. And you can also edit files on the remote system, which is really handy if you're sitting at your Windows box and you've got somebody tells you you need to edit, Etsy hosts on the remote computer. Smart TTY will let you do the editing locally. And it's also intelligent enough to know that the way that files are stored, specifically the line feeds, are different between Windows and Mac OS or Linux. So Smart TTY will compensate for that, and they'll say, okay, let me show it to you in a way that makes sense on Windows. And when we store it back on the remote system, I'll go and change those line feeds so that they make sense on the remote side, which is a great feature. It's also the most common source of problems when you're dealing with Windows and Linux systems. Let's go back over one thing. I want to make sure this is really clear because this was my biggest reason for not using SSH keys early on. I didn't understand how the authentication process worked. And I was worried that someone on the server would be able to connect back to my laptop, or someone on a server with my public key connect to some other server with my public key. You can't. The only thing that SSH keys allow you to do is connect from a system that has the private key to a system that has the public key. You can only go from a system with the private key to a system with the public key. You can't go from the server back to the laptop. You can't go from a server to a server. If you, for some reason, totally swap those file names around and you have the public key on your laptop and the private key on the server, please don't do that. But if you did, it wouldn't work. It only works if you have the private key locally inside a file or in SSH agent, and the public key is over on the server. Okay, that's the one thing I wish I'd known, because that held me up for about 6 months, and I finally figured out that, okay, I guess this is reasonably safe. Again, the private key is stored in a file on the disk, but we're going to load it into the SSH agent automatically as part of SSH prep. And that means that I don't have to type the passphrase that protects the private key every time. So what can I do with this? I can get a terminal connection over to a remote server. I can copy files back and forth. We have SCP and rsync. You notice how we have an rsync with -e space SSH. It's a very common way to transfer files back and forth. There's also SFTP, which is very much like the FTP command line program. There's SSHFS, where I can make the remote file system, part of the remote file system's drive, show up on my computer as if it were local files. It's like an SMB mount or an NFS mount And I can do that all over SSH, which is totally encrypted. I can use this for a VPN connection, for port forwarding, for managing systems with Ansible, anything that uses SSH. In short, once I'm using keys, I can do all the things that I could have done with passwords. I'm only changing how I proved to the other end who I am. Everything else is still on the table. Anything else I could have done with passwords, I can do with SSH keys. The slight advantage too is that with a password login, if I have a cron job that I want to have run all through the night, every hour, I can't do that because there's no human at 2 a.m. to type in my password. If I have SSH keys set up, it's possible to do a little bit more work and have it so that the cron job can use my key. When I reboot the client system, one thing that'll happen is that your private key will no longer be automatically loaded. That doesn't happen automatically at boot time. So one of the things to remember is when you bring your system up for the first time or after you've powered it off and restarted it, make sure you run the command ssh-add. ssh-add will go down and look for any private keys on disk. It'll load them into memory, into the agent. And if those private keys are protected with a passphrase, like they should be, then it will ask you for the passphrase for any keys that you have, and only then will they get loaded into the agent. Why do we do this? Well, you've got a file which in theory provides immediate and direct access to what could be hundreds of systems. I don't want the case that somebody steals my laptop in an airport while the screen is unlocked and they can pull that file off and all of a sudden they have instant access to every system that I have access to. So, I lock my screen, but more importantly, I put a passphrase on my private key. And that's what you need so that if someone pulls that file off of disk, they can't use it immediately unless they know your passphrase. The difference is I enter the passphrase once when I run SSH add versus entering a password every time I connect to any remote computer anywhere. If you're not sure if you have your keys loaded, run ssh-add space -L, and that will list any keys that you've got in memory. I think someone asked a little earlier, are we going to cover security in this? Oh, heck yes. Absolutely. If I step away from my laptop, first thing is, my rule is if I can't see the keyboard or the screen, I lock the screen, meaning I have to log back in with my normal user account on my laptop. So that's one level of protection. However, if you're saying to yourself, I'm leaving for an hour for lunch, or I'm leaving for the day and this system is going to stay on all night long, you have a couple of good options. One is to put in a lock path, is to simply lock the agent. If I run ssh-add space -x, that tells the agent, I want you to stop handing out the key. Hold on to them in memory. We'll make it a little easier. But don't hand it out until I come back and I run ssh-add-X and I type in the same temporary password that I used to lock it in the first place. You can use a different password every time. You can use the same lock password every time, whatever works for you. The more, I think, more straightforward way is to simply tell the agent to forget all your private keys. And that's ssh-add space -D to remove all the keys that you've got in memory. Now, when you go to connect up to some remote system, it's going to say, well, I'm happy to get you there, but you're going to have to give me that private key. It makes more sense just to run the ssh-add command when you come back from lunch or when you get in at first thing in the morning. That pulls all your keys into the agent. And again, make sure you lock your screen whenever you can't see the screen or the keyboard. What happens if I need to go through one system to get to another? In a lot of companies, this is common. It might be called a jump box or something else. You may have a system on the edge of a cloud network where you have one box you have to go through in order to be able to get to the others. Well, this turns out to be common enough that the people who make SSH figured out this is one where we could use a little help. So I'm using the concept of your laptop as the machine where you sit and type. And I want to connect through a box in the middle. And once I get there, I want to go to a remote system. Let's see how to do this by hand. And then in just a minute, we'll show you how to do it automatically. Remember, the private key never leaves your keyboard. So how are we going to make that second connection? It's relatively straightforward. Down in the middle of the screen, I have SSH-A space middle. That's just what I'm calling the middle system. You might have an IP address or a host name or some kind of short configuration option to work with, but the box is called middle. When I do that, you notice how the prompt changes to the middle box is command line. And on that middle box's command line, I type SSH space remote. And the next thing you would see is a login prompt on the remote computer. So wait a second. How did I authenticate to that third computer? The answer is the -A option says I want to make the SSH agent, which is normally my laptop only, I want to have it show up in the middle box. I don't have to copy the program over. I don't have to do any special forwarding. I just need that -A option. And that teaches the first SSH command. Oh, by the way, in addition to giving me a command prompt, if anyone on the middle box needs to authenticate to go somewhere else, pull that authentication back to the laptop. That's weird. It works really well. As long as you get the SSH agent working on the laptop, now the agent, it kind of exists on the middle box so that you can do all of that stuff we talked about before. SSHing somewhere, using SCP to copy files around, SFTP, rsync, Ansible, anything else. So the agent never leaves your laptop. The private keys never leave your laptop. That's the goal. Now, the only downside to this is that I am trusting a little bit the security of the middle computer. And if anyone is able to get access to root or administrator on that middle box, they may be able to see the named, I think it's a named pipe in the middle computer that actually handles this work. And they may be able to SSH using the agent on my laptop. So the short version is, if you don't trust the root or administrator count on the middle box, don't use this approach. It's not safe. But you're generally safe from other people on the middle box. It's just the root or administrator account you need to worry about. There are a couple of other options to this. One is to use proxy command or proxy jump. Both of those are available. Proxy command has been around ever since I can remember using SSH. It's available everywhere. All of the SSH implementations I've seen have it. I want to thank Ethan for pointing out that there's a slightly simpler version called proxy jump. And that one is not necessarily available on every system. So you want to check the man page for SSH_config. Make sure proxy jump is listed. And if it is, then you can use proxy jump tab, the name of the server you need to go through to get over to the remote computer. So in our example on the previous slide, instead of using gate 1, I would use middle or the IP address of that box or something. If you need to go through multiple systems to get to this target computer, you can actually chain through them and just list them with commas, separating them on the proxy jump command line. I want to apologize because this is not something that everyone's going to need to use. I only want to make sure you know it's there so that if you need to go through a middle box, you know that these options exist. When it comes time to needing to use them, you can come back to this PDF and say, aha, Bill talked about something. What the heck was that anyways? This isn't the most efficient way to do this because you're double encrypting the traffic between yourself and the middle box, which is fine. You don't even notice. It means a little bit more CPU power on your laptop, a little more CPU power on the middle box. But you get the advantage that all the connections start from your laptop, strangely enough. Even though they're going through a middle box, your agent doesn't have to get forwarded. Let's take a look at a couple of common questions, and then I'm hoping we'll get to some other questions that have shown up on Zoom or in Discord. Can I still use passwords if I start with this approach? Absolutely. There's no flag day where you suddenly have to switch over all of your connections to SSH keys. You can do this one at a time. If you come across, you start using it with 5 or 6 new systems, and then you try to SSH to some computer you haven't used this before, no problem. It'll ask you for a password. You can just hit Control-C, and then you can do SSH prep space, the name of the server you want to connect to. Make sure all the prep work is done, and then from that point on, you can use keys. You can kind of migrate one at a time, get all of your systems over to using SSH keys. Can the server connect back to me? No. Can a server on which I put my public key connect to another server on which I put my public key? Nope. Doesn't work that way. I want to make sure that's really clear. What happens if the private key is stolen off my laptop? Well, this is why we strongly, strongly, strongly recommend you have a passphrase on it. You never use a passphraseless SSH key except in very, very limited circumstances. Your private key should always have a passphrase on it so that if the laptop is stolen, you don't have to suddenly realize that that attacker can now reach every single SSH server you've ever connected to. It's a great time to go and clear out the old public key from all of your servers, and good time to go and create a new key. Can I block passwords entirely? Oh, absolutely. Once you're confident that all of the users that need to get to that server have used SSH keys, by the way, fantastic. You want to edit the file /etc/ssh/sshd_config. This is the usual place where you do configuration for the SSH server. And in that file, if you have a line that says password authentication, you're going to modify it. If you don't, you make a new line that starts off with password authentication and you put no. Make sure you restart SSHD after that. On the Ubuntu and Debian side, you'll do sudo system control. I missed a T in there, sorry. SYSTEMCTL at systemctl space restart space SSH-service. On the Red Hat and Fedora and CentOS side, the only difference is it's SSHD.service. Either one of those will restart SSH for you, and now it will use that new option. What happens if I want to log in as root? Well, you've heard from us many times that's not a good idea, but sometimes it's necessary. So if you want to be able to do that, we suggest that you do this only with keys, not with passwords. And so in that same file, you'll add permit root login space without dash password. And that means that I can use an SSH connection to the root account, but I can't log in with a password. I have to have something stronger. And SSH keys are obviously the easiest way to do that. Do I need a password at all? Can I just not have a password on a remote machine? Well, actually, yeah, you do. And this is when you're running sudo. The sudo command allows you to take a non-root account and run things briefly as root when you absolutely have to, and you'll need your own private password on that server to do that. You can get around that by using the no PASSWD option inside etcsudoers. Make sure you understand the security risks of that, because you're essentially giving instant root access without anything more to that remote machine. It's not necessarily safe. Hey, before we go on, can some of the people?
Yeah, I have a pretty good question for you, Bill. I was actually
Please.
waiting for, because the attendee addressed you directly.
Got it.
The keys, when they're in memory, can they be retrieved by an external party?
Oh,
think
thank
Ryan
you.
can answer
I
that.
love that. That's an awesome question. No, they can't. The keys that are in memory for inside the SSH agent, remember, the agent is the only thing that actually holds the keys. The SSH agent never gives out the keys. The agent stores them in memory. In fact, it locks that memory so it can't even get swapped out to the swap space, because somebody could then just kind of walk through your swap space and try to pull out your keys. That the agent never hands them out. They're never given out by the agent. So there's no command you can type that will convince the SSH agent to hand you that decrypted private key.
We also have a couple of questions regarding best practices for storing private keys, especially for uses of automated processes.
Yeah. So for private keys, you have a couple of options. The easiest place to put them is in the .ssh directory off your home directory, because all the tools that deal with private keys know to look there. However, they don't have to be there. I can run the SSH add program and I can say, here is a path to a key that I want you to load. And that might be on a flash drive or a YubiKey or on some other piece of very secure storage. Flash drive is a great option because I can put in the flash drive long enough to load in the keys, and I can pull the flash drive out. And it means that the private key is never stored in a file on my laptop disk. So the key can go somewhere else 100%. Did that answer the question, or did I miss the point?
I think you covered it. I know this is like way past the scope of the conversation, but there's different vault applications that enterprises use. HashiCorp has a product, and that's one of the ways that we secure private keys in the enterprise. But
absolutely, lots of ways to do that. One that I think would be wonderful would be to actually generate a private and public key pair on a YubiKey. And this is a USB device. I think the YubiKey 5s support doing this, and GPG keys as well. So it's a little bit like a flash drive. They're not actual mountable drives, but they're authentication tokens that get used in multiple ways. And if you haven't used a YubiKey before, thank you, Slegna, for putting up that link. You really would want to look into those, especially if you're doing a lot of authentication or you really have a high security environment. Any other questions, gentlemen? All right. Tell you what, I'll keep going. And if you've got other questions, is somebody checking the Q&A section, by the way? It looks like there are a couple of queued up ones there.
Yeah, we're working on it right now, Bill.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. If you run into problems, let me just cover a couple of quick ones that show up all the time. If you get the message back, can't talk to SSH agent. You're not likely to see this if you've got a graphical desktop, but you might see this if you're logging in on a console or if you're using Windows. There's a very straightforward way to fix this. It means that the SSH agent isn't automatically started by whatever login approach you had on that computer, on that laptop. So to fix it, you run eval space $ left parentheses SSH-agent space -lowercase s right parentheses. That starts up the SSH agent in the background and brings you right back to a command prompt. That solves the problem right there. So any commands that I run inside that terminal from now on, we can use that agent. So I'll use SSH-add to load in my keys to that agent, and off I go. If I want to see what's going wrong, for some reason I can't connect, I need a little more detail on why, try SSH space dash lowercase v to be verbose, and then the name of the system to which I want to connect. Usually that's enough detail to let you know what's going wrong. Within the last couple of lines of that output, you'll see what the problem is. If you ever have to carry the public key over to a remote computer and you manually add it to authorized keys, hey, that's fine. There are lots of reasons why that might need to happen. Just please pay attention to the fact that your key has to be on one line. You can't let your editor do line wrapping. So double check that the key is all on one line or it won't work. So what else can I do with this? First off, I can add aliases to the line that says host. Inside the config file, /.sh/config, you're going to have a new section in there that was added by SSH prep. And this is for you to edit if you choose. You can add new entries to it. You can edit entries that are already there. And the host line can include not only the host name of the computer or its IP address, but it can also have any aliases that you want. I might have a 45-character long domain name that I would normally have to use, or an IPv6 address that's just a pain to type in. Why not put in DB1 or devel7? Something short that makes it much easier to remember. And now I can type SSH space DB1 or SSH space devel7 instead of some huge long host name or IP address. If you place the private key on removable media, fantastic, that's great. The only thing to pay attention to is that the FAT or VFAT format that's commonly used on flash drives, thumb drives, doesn't really understand permissions and ownership. So you have this unfortunate circumstance where the file may get loaded on the flash drive, but it may not be what's called limited to just you being able to read it and write it. So this might be a time where it might make sense to format that flash drive first when it's empty, please. Format that flash drive first with whatever file system your operating system likes best. And that might be ext4 or I can't remember what the Mac uses. Apologies. I'm sitting on a Mac right now. I can't remember the name of it. If you have the ability to run a command when you lock the screen, this might be a good place to run a command to remove your keys. Remember the command we showed earlier that says take all of my keys out, SSH-add space capital D? Well, if I run that automatically when I lock the screen, then my keys are gone the minute I've hit lock. And the next time I come back from lunch and I log in again, I have to go and enter my keys. But at least the removal is automatic. The SSH Masterclass, thank you, Captain Carson Teva. This is under development. There are a ton of things that we could cover. If I went through and I covered all the things that you could do with SSH and the tips and tricks and the security techniques and the different ways of configuring it, that could easily be a 1-day or 2-day class. I'm writing it now. So the SSH Masterclass, you can expect to see that in the not too far future. There's a lot to cover. If you have things you'd like to see in that class, I'll have my email address up at the end, and I would love to hear from you. I want to make sure that I include all the things that you're interested in. I've got one bonus because we've still got a few minutes left. I do want to go through this real quick, and this is one of the nicest performance features I've ever found. It's sharing connections. Instead of having a brand new SSH connection every time I connect to a remote server, I want to tell SSH, connect to a server the first time I want to go there. Every time I want to go to that same server after that, use the first connection. We've already logged in. We've already authenticated. We've already set up all the encryption parameters. It means that the second and future logins are instantaneous. Everything's still encrypted. We're not losing any security in it. We're just making it instantly available. And so this one change, if you run that command on the up at the middle of the screen, make dir /ssh/sockets and chmod 700 /ssh/sockets, that makes the directory where these are going to be stored. And then down at the bottom of /ssh/config, you add the 4 lines at the bottom, or you append those 3 lines if you already have a section called host asterisk. You can type that in verbatim. Control path, control master, control persist with the values that are on that slide. And now, when from the next time you connect out to a host called devel1, it logs in like normal. Nothing changes, except it saves a little socket in that directory. The next time I connect out to devel1, I don't actually do an SSH connection. I use the original SSH connection, and that connection will hang around for an hour in memory if nobody's actively using it, and then it will go away if literally I'm done working with that system. That's it. It is a one-time change. You don't have to make anything custom for every target system. You just have to run those 2 commands and add that one block, and this is instantaneous. Note that if I want to do forwarding, I have to do this on the first connection. I can't add additional forwarded ports when I make future connections. We're not talking about forwarding today. I just wanted you to be at least aware of that. All it means is if you want to do some type of forwarding, make sure you place it in //.ssh/config so that those forwarded connections happen automatically with the first connection. Okay. Open to more questions. Any others that have come up on QA or in webcast live chat?
Yes, I got a couple for you, Bill.
Great.
The most recent question we got is the SSH connection hanging around increased risk?
I don't believe that's true. You have technically got an authenticated connection between 2 servers. I'm not aware of easy ways that could get abused. Now, that said, if you're doing port forwarding between 2 systems over the SSH connections, or you're doing agent forwarding or X Windows forwarding, you have some pathways between the client and server that are held open because you asked for them to be opened, and they will be around even if you're not actively doing anything with that SSH connection. So in that case, it would make sense to me to close that connection down when you're not using it, so those port forwardings are not always hanging around in memory. But other than that, I don't see a big security risk from leaving connections open. I've left connections open for more than a week, and I'm not aware of any security issues with that. Hannah, Keith, David, anybody else?
Yes, I have a question for a list of suggestions or best practices for SSH key management.
Suggestions for SSH key management. Oh, there are a couple of different ways to consider that. One is to have keys that have a time limit or to use a revocation list. It does mean that you have to be able to check that revocation list, and I think that's a little out of the time that we would have today to cover. I believe using an SSH Vault. Thank you, Sublime, for putting a link in there. That I've not used that product, but perhaps that's a good option. You also want to think about the fact that keys have to be revoked when a person leaves a company. So not only do you want to have them erase the private key off their laptop, whether they leave the laptop with you or they take it with them, but you also want to make sure that the public keys for that user are no longer on any of your servers. And so this is where you need some ability to scan all of your server environments and say, is this public key out there? If so, then I need to remove it.
I had another point that I'd like to bring up if we have some extra time.
Sure do. Absolutely.
And that's so if you're if you're logging into a server with multiple users, like a supercomputer or something, and you don't have proper permissions on your home directory, such that your home directory on the server is writable, a malicious user on that same system could then put their own SSH keys into your server directory and then log in as you.
Absolutely correct. And Anna, that's a beautiful reminder. That is a terrible security stance to have your home directory writable, or worse yet, the .ssh directory off of it writable. That is just a nightmare. So if you'll note, the SSH prep tool will change the permissions on the .ssh directory so that only you can see inside it. Nobody else can read from it. Nobody else can write to it. Nobody else can try to execute things located in it. It's just you. And in fact, if you try to SSH to a remote system using a key that is writable by somebody else, or a .ssh directory that's writable by somebody else, in some cases, you won't be able to log in at all, because the SSH server will refuse to use that authorized key, saying, wait a second, that's insecure. I'm not even going to honor what's in there. And that partly handles that situation, although it's much better to simply lock down that permission right off the bat so that circumstance never shows up. Any others, guys? So I'm going to start video back up again. I would love to have anybody who's enjoyed this talk do one of two things, or both. One is, if you liked it and you think it's valuable, please send the link over to any coworkers that you've got that are still using passwords, any friends that are still using passwords. I'd love to have people start to migrate off passwords when possible. And the second is, if you find any things with this presentation that you wish it had, or you'd like to see in the SSH Masterclass, if you run SSH prep and you find it works or it doesn't, I'd love to hear both of those. Send me an email, let me know, because if I find out, for example, that it doesn't work on Windows 7 with whatever, I'd like to be able to either address that directly, or at least put in a note saying, hey, we found out it doesn't work in this environment. So please, any feedback is welcome, positive or negative. Any other questions?
Looking. I mean, the only question I have is, what is SSH?
Yep, secure shell. I really should have started off the presentation with that. Wouldn't that have been much more valuable? Tatu Ilonen at University of Helsinki, I think, found that his co-workers were making plain text connections back and forth between their client systems and the servers in the building. It's like, hey, this really can't be safe. And especially after, I think there was a big break-in, they said, hey, we need something better. He wrote the original SSH, and at one point he changed the license. So it was originally totally open source, and then he switched it over to a license that's not really open source anymore. Some people came along and started the Open SSH project. They grabbed the last open source version. They fixed all the bugs that have been fixed since then, and that's now called Open SSH. So the Open SSH project and the original version sold by SSH Communications Security, I think it's ssh.fi, but I'm not sure about that. have kind of worked in parallel over the years, and they're mostly interchangeable. They're not strictly interchangeable, but they're pretty close. And I'm so glad that this tool is available, because it means I can connect to a remote machine and not have to worry about who's listening. Hey, thank you, everybody. The questions are absolutely welcome. You can keep them coming. Jason, did you have other things you wanted to cover before we call it a day?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us for this Black Hills Information Security webcast. We have our guest here from Active Countermeasures, and so if you've never been on one of their webcasts, they talk about threat hunting all the time. They have a 6-hour threat hunting class that happens pretty periodically, so definitely check that out. Plus, Keith's Malware of the Day is one of the best blogs out there if you want to learn about threat hunting or want to see what malware does. Whenever I do tabletop exercises with customers or demos for people, it's something that I talk about. It's threat hunting, and you can definitely tell the audience sometimes is like, we don't know how to do that, and where it's like, well, go to Malware of the Day to help get started. Plus, we got Rita, and this is the
Jason,
Rita team.
Thank you, Jason.
I got to go.
Had a big part in that as well. So thank you.
Make sure that Hannah gets a lot of credit. No offense, Keith, but Hannah put in a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make that whole blog series work.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, Hannah, that's good to know. I didn't know, so now I do. Thank you. All right, everybody. I'm going to give Bill his last final words for the webcast, not in general. So, Bill, what are your final words for today?
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time. We really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you again.
All right. If you need a red team, threat hunt, ActiveSOC, or any of the other services we have at Black Hills, you know where to find us. And with that, Ryan, go ahead and kill the webcast today. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.